Well, front to us a son was born and a child was given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called the Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Them call him Lidj Tafari. When he was born, rain fall from the sky. Them call him Lidj Tafari. When he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Lidj Tafari. The lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Lidj Tafari. Read the Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if England or Cote d'Ivoire. Well, lion voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion voice. Greetings in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I. Glory and honor in the name of his chosen Queen, Empress Waziri Menen. My name is Kwasi Bonsu, aka Dejazmatch Kwasi, aka Ras Kwasi, aka the Reading Ras, aka the Pan-African Happy Man. I'm an entertainment attorney, I'm an artist, I'm an author, I'm an actionist, and today I sit before you as the host of the Lion Voice vlog. And today it's an extra special blessing because today, while you're watching this, marks the 130th anniversary of the birth of Lidj Tafari, who would become His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. So first and foremost, I just want to greet all of my Rastafari family, all my brethren and my sistren globally, and just say heart of love on this momentous occasion. Right now, as we speak, Nyabinghi Isis are being chanted around the world. Reggae stage shows are underway in other regions. So it's celebrations across the world, and this day is just a testament to some of the impact that the birth of Lidj Tafari has had on the planet Earth. Think about the burst of positive energy as the Nyabinghi 1-2 goes up through creation. Think about the positive energy at the reggae shows that will be happening this evening on this momentous occasion. This is a day for celebration to my non-Rastafari family. Today is a special episode of the Lion Voice vlog. I'm going to go into the history of the birth of Lidj Tafari in just a moment. As we did in the Emperor Theodros episode, I got some messaging. A lot of the item enjoyed that history, so we're going to do a lot more of those character studies and histories of figures. We'll start with the Haile Selassie I Ethiopia book and go through some of the central figures in that book, and then we'll work our way to other African history, Ethiopian history, as we continue the journey. But this is a special episode because this episode is all about the 130th anniversary of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, the birth of that baby boy Lidj Tafari. So first, some of you may ask who are not Rastafari, why you Rastafari can celebrate, but why should we care about something like this? And first, I just want to say, without this day, without the birth of Lidj Tafari, there would be no Rastafari movement. There would be none of this global burst of positive energy. This coming together that is happening on this day would not happen. Let's look at the impact that Rastafari has had on the world so far. One of them, locks are now widely accepted throughout the world, particularly in black culture, but you see people with locks. When Rastafari brethren and sistren in Jamaica were looking at the newspaper and seeing the Mau Mau revolution in Kenya, and you had elders like Ras Tafari and the Sons of Thunder, Youth Black Faith, that would look and see these, and this is in the 1950s, and they decided in solidarity to grow their locks. Also looking in the biblical aspect and seeing the vow of the Nazarene in Numbers, and seeing that the growing of locks has always been a part of the tradition of the Hebrew, the African Hebrew. You know, locks has always been a part of black culture going back to the ancient time. And even in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, you have the Bahatawi priests who are, you know, essentially a monastic tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox, and these brethren grow locks and have been growing locks from that time. So locks has always been part of our tradition. But in terms of spreading it globally, the Rastafari brethren and sisters, particularly out of Jamaica, have been responsible for taking locks to the mainstream. People like Bob Marley have to get a lot of credit, because the image when people see people with locks is still Rastafari. And as a testament, when you go to Africa and you have locks, anywhere you go, people will say Rasta, whether or not you are Rastafari. So that image is indelibly burned into the mark. So Rastafari brought forward that ancient way of our knowing of ourselves as African. Because remember, before humanity and mankind went to the barber, you're born naturally. Your locks is a natural part of the natural man. Sister Kalanji has a song, Them a Wonder, and he says, we remind them so much of who they are supposed to be. Why does he say that? Because if you allow yourself without going to the barber, without worrying about these things, you are naturally already Rastafari. You have to make a conscious decision to alter your feature from Rastafari image. So that's one of the impacts at Rastafari movement. And again, that would not have happened. These brethren were inspired by Lidj Tafari, Rastafari, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. So that's one. Another impact, we see now cannabis is enjoying a resurgence around the planet, where people are looking into the scientific properties. You know, in Israel they isolated THC, and from there it's been non-stop research around the world. But before all of this happened, before this was in vogue, our Rastafari elders told the people that herb, cannabis, was the healing of the nation. They were laughed at, they were scorned, they were jailed, they were in prison, they were beaten, some were killed for this, for the locks, for the sacramental use of cannabis, which now they have found and verified was a part of the anointing oils of the Hebrew, and the part of the sacred sacraments that were in the censer when the priests would go through the aisles from the Old Testament days up to now. They found cannabis seeds all throughout Israel, which is why we led them to study this thing. So this has always been part of our tradition. In ancient time up to modern time, in China it was used as a medicine. Around the world the ancient peoples used this plant. Rastafari brought this to the fore again, through the music, through the global spread of the movement. Rastafari led this movement of cannabis as the healing of the nation. Now it is legal in many states, on its way to being federally legal. It's federally legal in Canada. We see many countries of the world, Uruguay, other countries that have now begun legalizing. Even Jamaica has a medical cannabis regime. All of this was on the back of the Rastafari movement. And so, again, none of this is possible without the birth of Lidj Tafari, providing that divine inspiration for brethren and sisters to have an anchor and an example to rise. Another example would be the Ital, the vegan diet that is out there. And Ital and vegan are different. Ital is a higher standard than vegan. which is plant-based but can be highly processed, high sugars and different things. Whereas Ital is in the natural state, using the natural whole foods to create delicious foods. Coconut or iconut is a essential part of the Ital cooking, for seasoning flavor, natural flavors. But this plant-based levity, which we contend a lot of the early hippies used to travel to Jamaica and were inspired by their interaction with Rastafari elders, and they would go to places like California, and this is where the culture really spread. So the Ital is now, people used to laugh again at Rastafari for this and think that they were crazy. Now their doctors are telling them plant-based, and plant-based is widely accepted as something. Vegan now is coming into the mainstream. So this is another impact. You even have Slutty Vegan right now, and big up Sister Aishel, one of our Rastafari family here in Baltimore. Her daughter is the owner of that establishment. Whether or not you support the name, because of course as Rastafari, the slutty part is gonna be rough. But the impact of that vegan, that's directly, we can trace that to Rastafari teaching, and the mainstream impact of that, this healthy. And we look at those type of restaurants as a gateway, where people who are coming from that slave diet, the soul food, into a new reality, plant-based. So again, that's an impact Rastafari has had. Without the birth of Lidj Tafari, none of that is possible. Another impact, repatriation or repatriation. I was reasoning with a sister of mine and saying repatriation because that's how we say it in Jamaica, but in the proper English it's repatriation. So just putting that out there. But this was a chant that Rastafari championed. As many of you know, I'm back and forth between Ghana. I am a live witness to tell you today that repatriation is in effect. Just stay at the Ghana airport and you will see the diaspora is coming in. Just look at the price of goods and services in the construction industry. Just look at the real estate market in Accra and in the greater Accra area, if you want to ask yourself whether or not repatriation is a reality. Rastafari championed this, planted the seeds, again through the music, to make this something that was in the consciousness of black people, part of the Pan-African movement, carrying on that tradition of Marcus Garvey. This was one of Rastafari's goals, and Rastafari continues to chant repatriation. We'd want more, but trust me and believe that Rastafari will be providing a major part of the soundtrack for this repatriation that is underway. We're getting ourselves in order, but trust and believe, people, some powerful music is going to be coming from our Rastafari brethren and sisters within the creative industry as this repatriation unfolds. But it has begun. Rastafari were the prophets who continue the tradition of Marcus Garvey to chant this repatriation to the world. And how did they do this? It was by the global spread of conscious reggae music. Rastafari is responsible for reggae going global. The Wailers, Black Uhuru, so many different groups, Israel Vibration, Culture. There were so many that paved the way and blazed the trail. Burning Spear. These brethren were playing stadiums. These brethren paved the way for the global spread of conscious reggae music, so that it's associated, reggae itself is associated with Rastafari, although they're very separate and distinct. Reggae being a tool that Rastafari used to spread the knowledge. However, reggae is also something that come out of a Rastafari vibration, because from Rocksteady, reggae is also built off of the 1-2, the Nyabingi, slowing things down, taking it on that 1-2 journey. So reggae and Rastafari are very intertwined in that sense, although you have reggae music that is not Rastafari and many Rastafari that do not deal with reggae. So, but we cannot deny that Rastafari is responsible for the global spread of conscious reggae music. And for many Africans, reggae music is the first introduction that they have to Pan-African philosophy um, that brings them larger than just their tribe affiliation. When they hear Bob Marley, Africa Unite, or Burning Spear, or Culture, or many of these others, Peter Tosh, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. When they hear these songs, this is where the philosophy and the seeds are planted. This is where Rastafari power, not by the pointing of a gun. And Rastafari is one of the few faiths that has not been spread by physical conquest of other peoples, but strictly through the word, sound, and power, and that's largely through the conscious reggae music that Rastafari has spread around the globe. Another impact is that black people and the world in general is aware that Babylon is a reality. One time, people used to trust the government implicitly and sometimes explicitly. Now, when Rastafari is born in Babylon, born in the government, because we're in the information age, a lot of the information is now out there on the internet, so it's just a matter of you seeking. So it's not just a Rastafari born in something and you don't have any way to verify what they're saying. But this new world order, the global reset, all of these concepts that are now becoming aware to those people who search. Rastafari has been exposing these things from that time, burning Babylon unquenchably. Before the Vatican ever was revealed to be the largest agency of pedophilia that has been recorded, organized. And I'm not saying that to attack any religion, we're just stating facts that came out. Rastafari was born in the Vatican system, being established on the throne of David and questioning the authority of a throne of Peter and who set up this throne of Peter. So all of those things Rastafari did, burning Babylon, burning Buckingham, whose museums are full of stolen goods. All of these things were not popular, and people were persecuted, people were killed, people were ostracized from their families for doing this. Now you can turn on YouTube and you can watch thousands and thousands of people. You can go on the news, you can see news reports again that are critical. This was not popular when Rastafari did it. Rastafari had that impact as being a forerunner in this sense. Also, the building of Brand Jamaica. This is a touchy one that many people don't like to touch, but I say comfortably 80% of Brand Jamaica is based on Rastafari principle. When the outside world think of Jamaica, they think about Rastafari. It's not far behind. That's what gives Jamaica a competitive edge over the rest of the Caribbean, although Rastafari is throughout the Caribbean. And then I would say to a larger extent to that point, that when people think about the Caribbean, Rastafari is also there, because when you go to Barbados, when you go to St. Lucia, when you go to any of these other beautiful islands, you see Rastafari strong in the place. You're going to see the red, gold, and green. You're going to see because of the spread of the movement in these regions. And we give thanks to the Rastafari elders in Jamaica who traveled to the different islands to spread the teachings of Rastafari far and wide. That work has to be acknowledged. But this is the building of Brand Jamaica, and to some extent the entire Caribbean brand for tourism, which has generated hundreds of millions and billions of dollars for the economies of these countries. That was built again on the back of Rastafari, and this is something that, again, without the birth of Lidj Tafari, would not have been a reality. So this day, 130 years, we celebrate the birth of Lidj Tafari and all of these blessings. That's just the blessings or some of the impacts that the Rastafari movement has had. We haven't talked about how Lidj Tafari, why Rastafari gravitated to this baby boy that was born on this day in the mountains of Ajerso Godo. Why? The question can be answered if we look very quickly at some of the impact that Lidj Tafari had himself on the world. You know, aside from the birth of the Rastafari nation, because now it's evolving past just a movement into a literal nation without borders, you know, stretching as far and wide on every continent, but adhering to the principles of this man. And why this man? What were the achievements of this man that made so many people, and it's not just people of African descent at this point, they're European, Asian, all nation, all creed, all tongue, that hail His Majesty. And there's nothing that any of us can do about that. This is because of the birth of this baby boy. Why, again, do we ask? And we can look at the impact of His Imperial Majesty on the building of modern Ethiopia. So when he was born on this day 130 years ago in the mountains of Ajerso Godo, there was no guarantee that he would achieve anything. And we'll talk about the miracle of his birth shortly. But him ascending the throne, going through all of the obstacles in Ethiopia, shows the type of character, speaks to the legend, speaks to the power and the might of destiny in shaping the path for this baby boy that was born on this day in the mountains of Ajerso Godo. The things that he did once he ascended, the ending of slavery in Ethiopia, the institution of slavery. Remember that Ethiopia is the cradle of humanity and where slavery began, which African slavery was more akin to indentured servitude than chattel slavery. We want to make this distinction very clear. But slavery was live and well in Ethiopia up until the time of His Majesty. Menelik had made efforts to end the trade, but it was still very much alive. In 1920s, His Majesty put in place legislation against slavery to cut the trade, set up infrastructure to execute, to actually go after slave traders within the realm. These were things that he did. Having Ethiopia end centuries-old isolation, traveling to Europe, having Ethiopia admitted into the League of Nations. This was part of his legacy. Again, not just being a local legend or a regional legend or a national legend, but stretching out, playing on the world stage for all to see, for all to judge. He did do that. And that League of Nations move set up the judgment of the nations that would come in 1931 at the League of, 1936 at the League of Nations. To judge them, he had to be a part of that. This is history and facts, although it sounds like prophecy. And this is the beauty of the impact. The first thing he did when he ascended the throne as the emperor is to put restraints on his own power by granting Ethiopia's very first constitution, creating a constitutional monarchy. You know, who does that? The King of all kings, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah does that. And that constitution was later revised to give even more power to the people, because the first constitution, the upper house, which would be akin to the Senate, was really, or the House of Lords in the British parliamentary structure, was all of the different races, the regional rulers were able to participate in that way, later evolving to the lower house. And the lower house was people who were appointed, because he had to select people who he had educated, who he knew were competent to fulfill the demands of the work. Later on, the people were able to elect those representatives. And again, these are revolutionary steps in an ancient realm that was essentially a feudal empire, where it ruled by decree. That means the emperor, whatever he spoke was law. There was no assurances. We did have the Fetanagas, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church also did, but all in all, the emperor had no restraints in terms of power. There was no clear outlining for the average person in terms of the law. His Majesty, this baby boy born on this day, was responsible for creating that. One of the greatest achievements of any world leader in history, the creation of the education system of Ethiopia. So we're going from zero education for the public to a whole entire public infrastructure that culminated in Addis Ababa University, which at that time was Haile Selassie University, which he gave his own palace as the university. Again, a powerful symbol, stepping out of his palace, the highest seat of the nation, and saying that this is for education. This is part of the legacy of the baby boy born on this day. So its glory, its honor, His Majesty. He built the modern Ethiopian military. So during the era of the priestly warrior kings, the emperor would have their private army, regional army, and then they would beat the drum, and the other races, kings from the other kingdoms and regions would have to rise their personal armies, and then they would all meet to go and deal with the central threat. Haile Selassie formalized the military, setting up barracks, a permanent professional military trained, so not leaving it to happenstance. That military infrastructure, Ethiopia at one time was one of the most powerful militaries on the African continent. They're still, I think, in the top 10. That was built by His Majesty. So taking them from the raw bravery of old to a formalized military structure. The training of the African liberation movements. Again, once Ethiopia was there with their military, they were able to train. Mandela testified he had his first pistol was given to him by His Majesty. His Majesty sent arms, training for the Mau Mau, for the liberation movements in South Africa, Zimbabwe. All of these places were being supported by Ethiopia. His Majesty sent troops into the Congo, part of UN peacekeeping efforts in the Congo, with the Belgium interference and the CIA interference there was documented with Lumumba. His Majesty sent Ethiopians down into the Congo to help stabilize the region. The building of the commercial sector, the economics. If there's no economics in the nation cannot be self-sustaining. His Majesty attracted foreign investment on his trips around the world, meeting with high-level business people, providing incentives for investment in Ethiopia. His Majesty set that infrastructure as no other leader before him ever could imagine. The reinstitution of conservation in Ethiopia, so establishing national parks for conservation for the animals, really looking to protect Ethiopia's biodiversity. Also, the planting of trees. His Majesty encouraged the planting of trees to correct the deforestation. The years and centuries of war had its impact, because as these armies traveled, they would cut down trees for firewood. The local people would cut down trees for firewood. So, over time, this has ravaged. Ethiopia's lost, I believe, over 70% of its tree cover from ancient time. It was full of ancient forests, and you can imagine the beauty of that land when it was fully forested. So His Majesty started that again, the conservation. The separation of the Ethiopian church from the See of Alexandria, St. Mark in Alexandria. So Ethiopia used to be a branch of the Church of Egypt, the Coptic Church, and so the archbishops had to be sent from Egypt. This caused a lot of problems in Ethiopia, because only the archbishop could consecrate the different bishops for the region and all of these things. So if he died, they had to wait. Emperor Johannes went to great lengths to get an archbishop from Egypt. Many of the emperors had these problems. His Majesty was able to negotiate with the church in Egypt for Ethiopia to become its own independent branch of the Orthodox faith. So you know the heights of reasoning His Majesty had to do in order to achieve that. He did the same thing with the Bank of Ethiopia, which was an offshoot of the Bank of Egypt, allowing Ethiopia to mint its own coin, again become independent. Ethiopian birr was the same one-to-one with the US dollar during the reign of His Majesty. So it was pegged to the dollar, which at that time was pegged to gold. So His Majesty was able to have massive impacts on the economic development. Up until now, Ethiopia is still, with all of the tribal strife, the wars with Eritrea, the war with Tigray, the war internal with the Oromo and Hara, all of that chaos, Ethiopia is still one of the fastest developing nations. The Renaissance Dam is nearing completion. All of those infrastructure were put in place, the development plan of His Imperial Majesty. So even with all of these external forces trying to pull Ethiopia apart, the work was so meticulously done during the reign of His Majesty that Ethiopia continues on its development path because of all of the education, the training, the highly skilled labor that His Majesty set the foundation. That cannot be debated, cannot be denied. It is a fact, and this is the direct impact of Gadamawe Haile Selassie I. And we celebrate that as we celebrate today and the birth of that baby boy, Lidj Tafari, to Ras and Yashimobet. Organization of African Unity, now the AU, the African Union, that is also again part of the impact. It was forged in Addis Ababa. The shuttle diplomacy of Ketema Yeferu, His Majesty's foreign minister, shuttling back between the Monrovian Casablanca groups at the behest of His Majesty, using His Majesty's stature as a father of Africa to bring together that OAU 32 nation states signing in Addis Ababa. Great impact of His Majesty. Of course, the speech that became immortalized at the United Nations in Bob Marley's song War. His Majesty being the only world leader to address both the League of Nations and the United Nations in his capacity as head of state for all time. Again, judging the nations in righteousness. These things are all part of the historical record. But now I want to go to the story of Lidj Tafari. We might have to make this a two-part series because I can see that there's a lot of information. But again, it's a blessing, this 130th anniversary of His Majesty coming, and we are going to just continue with the story of Lidj Tafari. So, to paint the picture of Lidj Tafari, we have to jump in the time machine, the lion voice time machine, and return to Ethiopia in 1892.
Iron Vice.